welcome back, everybody. I think most people are back, and there will be one or two joining us over the next few minutes, I'm sure. I hope you've had a good break and are feeling relaxed now, ready for this afternoon, because over the next little while we welcome three charities, or three speakers from charities, I should say, who work in this field, and they are going to tell us something of the work that they have been doing and are currently doing to help to stem trafficking.
Thank you so much, and it's great to see you and be with you all again. I don't know if many of you were there when we were in person a few years ago. So thank you for inviting me back. Technology lets you do something that we never thought was possible. If we had thought when we last met, do you know what, in a few years we're going to have a conference, and when we get together we're all going to be on screens, and you'll have to put in a zone and a code, and then actually at some point you could go to the toilet and turn your camera off. We'd have all gone, what is she talking about? And here we are. So technology lets us do something. And that is what Stop the Traffic has been and is pioneering. An intelligence-led way of seeking to prevent people trafficking. When I was last with you, I think I shared the ideas and the progress we were making. So I'm just here to say, what's changed? What's changed since I last talked to you? Well, this has. Because we have suddenly in the world actually understood a bit more of intelligence-led, because all of us, probably, if you're like me, has a little look at the visual dials every day in COVID to see what our area's like. You see, data matters. Data means life and death, doesn't it? Science has created the ability for us to find our way out of this global pandemic, one that we know as a world we're still very much in. We're understanding how, using technology and an intelligence-led approach, we can inoculate ourselves, which is more than a vaccine. So when I now talk about Stop the Traffic having an intelligence, a data and a tech, I think more people are going, oh, okay, because it's actually affected me. How far have we got to go? I still believe we haven't got the urgency in the world that actually says, because this is happening to our brothers and sisters, as Imelda has so wonderfully shared, and I've had a sort of joy of being part of those sessions this morning and listening and learning myself. So what's changed since I last talked to you? Well, I think, and I'm not really going to tell much about Stop the Traffic, I really want to just come and give a bit of a picture, because I'm getting old now. I've been in this 16 years, so I thought, well, I'll come and give a few minutes. Well, we've got more awareness. Do you think we've got more awareness? I think, you know, it's in more stories. There's more people who don't look at me and think I'm fighting car congestion. There is a bit more. There's definitely more awareness. There are more organizations. There are more brands. There are more publications. There's more websites. And it's on more agendas. It's beginning in the business piece that we've pioneered with others, and into the financial piece and the banks, ESGs, human rights agendas. It's definitely more awareness than 15 years ago. There's more hands and it's more busy. And there is also, and I just again have to say, the extraordinary work of those, Imelda, that is just sharing, those on the ground, those who are seeing and front facing, those who serve and sacrifice, those who bring people back to life. But are we stopping it? Well, the answer to that is we're not. After 16 years, I'm in this because we're not. We are not preventing this crime. In fact, we're uncovering it. So we're seeing more of it, but I think what we're seeing often is we're uncovering it. So the numbers are going up. And to be honest, we're not quite sure if the numbers are going up because we're seeing it more, which I think is probably true, or the numbers are going up because you can make more money out of this. And I think that's probably true too. But part of that is the challenge of, so what? How are we, if we're in this, Ruth? Why are you doing this if your claim is to stop the traffic? Can we? Is that just a deception? Just an inspired title? And I think I'm here in these few minutes to tell you I don't think it is. I think the progress we've made, this is about fundamentally a global profit-making organisation that can make money. It's about money. At the root of this, it is about a profit from a product that can diversify and is on a scale to move, manipulate and exploit, using technology and using our globalized world on a scale that we've got now that we've never had. And yet those tools are available to us, those who fight it. And therefore, the work that Stop the Traffic has done is create the engine and the infrastructure to lead an intelligence-led way, to create an ability, I think, to reverse that risk, to make the profit low and the risk high to those who do it. The light is coming. And so for Stop the Traffic, we've built, using our partnership with IBM and others, we have built actually something called now on scale on the Traffic Analysis Hub. I've not brought you PowerPoints because if you're interested, go and have a look. I didn't want to sort of, I was going to say shield myself and just use slides, but more in these few minutes, paint you a picture, but go and look at the website. We actually, I gave that idea. So the Traffic has its own data hub, which we are building specifically, but I believe that we needed to build a non-competitive, open to all platform, which Traffic Analysis Hub, now led and directed by Neil Giles, who was my friend and colleague and still is over the last 15 years, once director of human intelligence at the Serious and Organised Crime Agency, and now CEO of Traffic Analysis Hub. Hooray! And so there are now 150 users and analysts. There's banks and businesses and not-for-profits and civil society. You know that dream I had when I last came to you, that we could bring all the actors together and start building the richest picture of trafficking. It's happening. It's got over 1 million incidents in it. It's got tools to analyze routes and hotspots, and people are beginning to uncover and see the light of what's there. Because we all have something to give and we all have something to find when we look at it. You see, the things that are stopping us win is that often every time an organization forms, it has stories and it has information, but it doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't know how to share it. The power of survivor stories are the gold, the fuel that will enable us to see this. But too often, most times, we are not able to draw that and build it into a data picture, and now we can. In fact, last week we held our second workshop where NGOs came and saw their stories turn into a data picture. And I was thrilled. In fact, it made my, not week, my life actually, when a leader of an NGO said, now I can see the power of the stories of the people I care for come to life and have the integrity that their story deserves. You see, things are changing because we can bring the stories into a place. We can stop the fragmentation. And my joy is to see banks coming and seeing something they couldn't see so they can understand the money flows and the disruption. Businesses coming because they can see what they couldn't see to understand the risks and the hotspots and the role they need to play. And also every not-for-profit to share what they know but to see what they could not see so that they can become powerful in how they use their resource, in who they collaborate with, in partnerships on the ground, in doing what they do even better. So for me, I hope I come with a call of encouragement, with a call that things are changing, but also maybe can I be bold? In fact, unless Hillary turns me off, I don't think you've got much control, have you, actually? But I want to, can I share as a vicar's wife to all of you? Because I've always felt that the church and faith networks around the world have the power to stop trafficking. Now the infrastructure and the technology, which is all out there, which we're pulling together, this is about convene, converge, and share generously. And I actually think we need to do that. I think we have the role to do that. I think we need to do it differently in the next 10 years, as we have done in the past. Because Jesus didn't come to build a brand. He came to change the world. And therefore, as he sent out and started to see one group working together, I think it is for us to lead that, of how we share our stories, how we convene and converge our resources, how we start to act differently and start to see what we could do. Because in the future, we need those who will sacrifice their lives in a way that humbles me, the way Imelda has started to convene and network across Europe. These things are beginning to happen, but the vision has to be that we can prevent and disrupt. And by 2030, we see the tide turn. And the church is called to lead that, because there is enough tech out there. We're just pulling it together. There's enough information out there if we can pull it together and share. And it's not an easy word, but it's an even harder action. And it's not good enough to say it unless we do it. I believe generosity is our model. And I finish with two thoughts. Stop the Traffic has reached over 10 million people in our campaigns. The numbers are big, but I'm going to tell you that this week, two stories moved me. The first was a young businesswoman who we've been working with in a global business, who was on a panel, and for the very first time ever, I heard a businesswoman, and she was a woman, happened to be a woman, but a business talk openly and transparently about the challenge they had and what they were doing to stop it. That's a revolution. Not hiding, not deception, but talking about the problem that they have. Transparency, the light's coming. And a young man in one of our projects, who's a refugee from Syria, sharing his story about the power that he shared using his mobile phone of our campaign in a camp to all his mates, using technology to prevent trafficking where he was. That's change. So I finish with being hopeful that the faith networks in the future, all that we have, we don't have to give up who we are, but we need to come together in a very different way around the well of data. Traffic Analysis Hub, a network of networks we create, because things happen when you come to a well, particularly when you're a woman. And then finally, we need to serve. This isn't about who we are and our brands or anything in the future, which is where the whole not-for-profit gets caught up. But as we sort of listen today, and just remember today, don't we, at this moment, the legacy of a man who served all his life, who actually we learned was creative and very challenging and transformational, 3 steps behind his wife. It's not about us shouting, but it is about us serving something that people can't see yet, where the world shares its stories, we build our capabilities, and it'll change us. And it'll change the church for good. And I believe it could stop the traffic.
Many thanks, Ruth. That was amazing. We think about the last year and what a learning curve so many of us have had using technology, and the change in attitudes that so many of us have at least begun to consider, because we are using technology in various ways, and we're getting better at it, we're getting braver with it. And yes, through our churches, we have a phenomenal network that we really do need to just work out ways to pull our story together, don't we? And hopefully we will then begin to make significant difference. So thank you so much. It's really
Thank you
good
for having me, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now. And we move on to our second speaker, who is from Hope for Justice. She's called Ellie Russell. I don't know a great deal about Hope for Justice, Ellie, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about the ways in which you work with traffickers and to help prevent it happening. So straight over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to come here and speak today and tell you a bit about the work of Hope for Justice. So introduce myself briefly first. My name is Ellie Russell and I am the UK Advocacy Manager here at Hope for Justice. So that basically means I oversee and support our team of independent mum slavery advocates, which is a bit of a mouthful as far as job titles go. So if you hear me refer to them as IMSAs later on, that will be the people that I am referring to. But they do a brilliant job providing complex and legal and support advocacy to survivors of mum slavery in the UK. I'm also a person of faith, and I really do count it a privilege to be involved in this work, as I do believe, and I'm sure as many of you do as well, that this is something that's really close to God's heart. And it's amazing to hear that you're meeting together, that this conference is happening and you're really focusing in on modern slavery, because obviously that means that you know and you realise that this is definitely not something that is confined to the history books. And it's great to hear from Ruth and hear, I would totally agree, how far the sector and actually the world has come in kind of awareness raising even about this issue. And it's actually really nice to hear from Stop the Traffic as well, because our founding CEO, Ben Cooley, who started Hope for Justice back in 2008, he actually first heard about the issue of modern slavery at a Stop the Traffic event, and that was what inspired him and motivated him to get involved and to do this work within the sector. So it's really brilliant. And thank you to Methodist Women in Britain as well for giving us, as different organisations, the opportunity to raise awareness and for you guys to support the fantastic work that is happening across the sector. So I'm going to start by over ambitiously probably trying to give you a whistle-stop tour of Hope for Justice, and then what I'd love to kind of focus my time on then is telling you specifically about the programmatic work that we are doing in the UK at the moment. So as I said before, we were founded in 2008 and we're currently working in 32 locations across 5 different continents. So it is an international charity, but we actually were founded in Manchester in the UK, and our vision is really simple, and it's a bold one, but it's one, like as Ruth was saying, that we absolutely believe in, and that is to live in a world free from slavery. And we propose to do that by a fourfold approach to combating slavery, and that is by preventing exploitation, identifying victims of modern slavery, restoring lives and reforming society. So whilst our programmes differ internationally in terms of how they look in different countries, they all aim to work in relation to those 4 key areas of prevent, rescue, restore and reform. So I'm going to focus and tell you about, well, what does that look like in the UK then? What are the programmatic areas around those 4 strands within the UK? So the first thing to tell you about is prevent, and I absolutely agree with Ruth that it needs to be a fundamental aim in all of our efforts around reducing and stopping modern slavery. Ultimately, we don't want people to experience it in the first place. And in the UK, we have some trainers, we have a lot of trainers, I should say, who their role is to equip frontline professionals with the knowledge and skills and tools to raise awareness, but also help people identify and spot the signs of modern slavery. So we deliver training to police, governments, local authorities, healthcare professionals, charities, businesses, the general public, so it might be people volunteering in homeless shelters or within food banks, anywhere that people might come into contact with a potential victim of modern slavery. And what we've seen is actually 75% of referrals that have then come into Hope for Justice with concerns around a potential victim have been from organisations or people that we have trained to spot the signs. So we really know that education is not only a strong tool in prevention, but also in identification and remediation of those currently trapped in slavery. And we obviously know, don't we, that modern slavery is a global issue, but I think it's also really important to remember that it is a local one. And that's why community engagement is at the heart of our work in the UK. So we currently host 3, we call them community engagement hubs in different locations around the UK that are staffed by experienced multilingual specialists whose job is to work in local communities to raise awareness, but especially within vulnerable and at-risk people groups, and really raise awareness within this around the signs to look for around potential kind of grooming into modern slavery, or ultimately kind of deception into modern slavery. And we work with police and other agencies to proactively identify potential victims of modern slavery, build bridges of trust with them, and help facilitate their exit from exploitation. And I think a good question to think about here, or one that people sometimes pose, is, well, why is there a need for NGOs or charities in this space? And I think a really good answer around that is that with potential victims or victims of modern slavery, there can often be a mistrust of authorities, and that can be for many reasons I'm sure you guys are probably aware of, in terms of there might be from the country that they are from, there could be corrupt police or corrupt authorities, so that's kind of what their view then is in our country. Or even we've seen with people we work with that it's been a control mechanism used by traffickers to instill fear in people of police or of authorities, of immigration, so they don't reach out and find help. So we really are there to act as that alternative pathway out of exploitation for victims who may be too scared initially to directly engage with authorities, and we work with them to be able to do that. So the next kind of programmatic area I want to tell you about, and probably the one I'm definitely, I was going to say most biasly passionate about, I'm not sure if that's even good English, but it's the area that I work in, so it's definitely something that I'd love to tell you more about, and that's under our Restore umbrella, which in the UK is our advocacy team. So Hope for Justice, we've been providing independent advocacy and support to survivors of modern slavery now for over 10 years in the UK, and that is via our brilliant team of IMSers who provide that long-term survivor care and advocate to ensure survivors have the support that they need as they move forward. I first joined Hope for Justice 6 years ago, so it's feels like a long time ago now, but I initially worked and did that role as an IMSA. So I thought I'd just tell you the story about the first survivor of modern slavery that I worked with, so a little bit about his experiences and then how we supported him, just to give you a flavour of the work that we do. So this man's name is John, I should say, and he is from Eastern Europe, and when he was in his early 20s, he was walking home one day when he was randomly assaulted, and he suffered a really serious and life-changing injury, which meant that it was ultimately difficult for him to find work in his home country. And he had 2 young children, and he needed to provide for his family. So as a result, he took up an offer of work in the UK, and sadly, this is how the story starts for many of the people that we work with, because exploiters deceive with false promises of good employment in the UK. And as in John's case, on arrival, the situation was sadly very different. The people he was met by were intimidating and violent, and he was put into a situation of forced labour for over 3 years. He worked in various different locations, moved around various different places in the UK, doing different jobs, working long hours, taken to and from his accommodation, unable to contact his family, unable to seek help. And I'm sure that that sounds like a familiar story that you might have heard before when we talk about this issue. But what moved me when I met John is he, in his own words, he talked about how that experience made him feel. And he said this: you feel like nobody. It's like you are forgotten. You feel empty and lonely. These people treat you like you're worth nothing, like dogs. And I just remember meeting John and just being so unbelievably angry that this was what this man had experienced, that someone else had exploited his life purely for their own financial gain. And as Ruth was saying, this issue just so quickly boils down to money. And what what people can gain from exploiting another person. And thankfully, John was eventually identified by our team. He was actually referred by a homeless shelter in Manchester that had been trained, and we were able to help him get out of that situation. But this was only the start of his journey, because many survivors, like John, then need to navigate complex systems to be able to access the care and support that they need to be able to overcome what has happened to them and start to make choices and decisions about their own future. So our IMSers are trained to identify legal and support needs and then advocate for a survivor's rights and entitlements. And this will look different for every individual we work with, but it often will include things like access to housing and subsistence, access to immigration advice to secure status in the UK if that's what they want, and various other types of legal advice, access to physical and mental health services, supporting survivors who wish to engage with the police and potentially engage with a criminal prosecution against their traffickers to go to court to give evidence and to be able to do that. And there are many barriers to overcome for survivors of modern slavery, and it is often as a result of complex systems that can often fail to provide for vulnerable people. So our IMSers, we work in partnership with lots of amazing people, so good local support services, various legal professionals, other services and community groups around the UK to help the survivor achieve the outcomes that they have set for themselves when we first meet them. So thinking back to our work with John, we advocated for his safe and stable housing. We supported him to access mental health support as he suffered severe PTSD as a result of his experiences. And we advocated for his entitlement to subsistence and supported him to regain his confidence to work. And you know, as I'm sure you appreciate, it is often not a linear journey of recovery for anyone who has experienced an element of trauma in their life. And it's often a kind of up and down process. And we know that just because somebody is physically free from their exploitation, that does not mean that they are immediately free from the effects of their exploitation. And for many survivors, they may have unknown debts that come to light because their traffickers have been using their ID. They may have been convicted for criminal convictions for crimes that they were compelled to commit during their trafficking. Something we see a lot with Vietnamese nationals who are trafficked to grow cannabis. And what our team does is we're working to ensure that survivors aren't left to face these negative ramifications of their experiences without support. So we're working to get unfair debts wiped, we're working to get criminal convictions reopened and overturned where we can, where that's possible, and really set a survivor on their own path to recovery. And it is a long process, and we're often working with people for sort of at least 12 to 18 months, and often that can be longer when there is a criminal case involved. You may have heard about a case, it was in the news a few years ago, called Operation Fort. It was a big case in Birmingham, and there's a really great Panorama documentary which I can recommend as well if you're interested, which is called The Hunt for Britain's Slave Gangs. And Hope for Justice was involved in that case, but it actually took 4 years for it to come to court. So that was a 4-year process that we were supporting survivors with, so that then when the case did go to trial, they were able to stand up and give evidence against those that exploited them, because we're really passionate about perpetrator accountability. We want to see the justice system holding those who are committing this crime to account, so we can reverse the tide and make it much more of a high risk and low gain crime, rather than currently it seems like quite a low risk and high reward crime. So to finish and to move on slightly and tell you quickly, and conscious of time, just about the reform element of our work. And I think it's key to think big. If you're wanting to end modern slavery, you know, we need to think big. And it was great to hear about the work of the Trafficking Analysis Hub. And you know, if we are serious about tackling modern slavery, we need to be serious about structural and systematic reform. And in the UK, I think that really is about seeing systems which best serve victims of modern slavery, and then seeing systems which help bring perpetrators to justice. So I've been asked also to share with you how you can support the work of Hope for Justice, and I've just seen someone's posted the link to the website in the chat, which is fantastic. So please do have a look and find out more about our work. The first thing I'd say is I'd love you to pray. I believe that God works for the survivors that we serve, and works through our team to be able to do that. Just recently we were worried because we hadn't been able to be in contact with somebody that we support, and we had real concerns that she was being exploited by somebody that she considered to be a friend, and we were praying about the situation, and thankfully after a number of weeks we were able to get in contact with her, and we were able to have conversations with her to get her to see what was happening in her situation and facilitate her move somewhere else and into somewhere safe. And what was amazing is our team noticed on her calendar about 2 weeks earlier, just on a random date in January, she'd written the word "start new life." And at that point, she was someone, you know, she is a young woman, she has learning difficulties, and she was still in exploitation. And she had at that point no clear way out or no idea how to start that new life. But that was something she decided she wanted. And it was only 2 weeks later that our team met with her and were able to provide a way out of that situation. The second thing is, if you feel able to, we are always, you know, we would always love if people can give financially to support our work, and we appreciate any and every contribution to the work that we do, because all of this work wouldn't be possible without the support of people like yourselves. So if you're able to, I can put some links in the chat as well of ways that you can donate to the work of Hope for Justice. There's ways that you could donate to give regularly, or donate in a one-off capacity. And as I say, both, you know, it really is, I do feel incredibly privileged to do the work that I do and to work with the survivors of modern slavery and see their resilience and see their hope for their future. And I know that I can only do that because people are sacrificing financially, they are praying for us all the time in the work that we do. So thank you again just for listening to me for 15 minutes and for being people that are passionate about this issue and being people that believe that, you know, we can make a difference and we can see God at work in this area. So I think that's my time, so I'm going to shut up. I will post those links in the chat, but thank you again for having me.
Many thanks, Ellie. We're delighted that you could join us today. Interesting to note that, you know, how effective you have found the training of different groups of people, that actually does, you know, bear fruit, if you like. And also interested in the community hubs that you mentioned, the community engagement hubs. Several of our groups were wondering what they could do locally earlier this morning, and so finding out a bit more about that would be quite helpful for some, I think. So thank you again, that's great.
Thank you.
Good luck with all you do. And we're going to move on again. We have one more speaker before we take a little break. And let me introduce you to David Maidment, who works for Railway Children. And I think he's going to show us some slides in his talk so that we can see something of the work that the Railway Children are engaged in. So over to you then, David.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from sunny Nantwich in Cheshire. I was 36 years, was a railway manager. I'm currently safeguarding officer of the Cheshire South Circuit. I started the Railway Children 25 years ago. They call me founder ambassador now. I better tell you what this 25-year-old charity does. It's actually based in Crewe, which I suppose is a very good place for a charity with a railway name in it. But we actually support street children who live on or around railway stations and bus stations, transport systems around the world. We do that because we identified from a risk assessment that actually trying to get in at the early stages when a child first runs away, that is the riskiest and the most vulnerable time, when a child who's a runaway, who's abandoning home for some reason or another, is most at risk of being picked up by a trafficker, a drug user, a paedophile, or somebody who would exploit them in some way or another. And when we looked at that, we decided that actually it's as the children flee from their towns, their rural places, and come into the mega cities of the world that they're most at risk. And where do you find them? On the transport systems. And so the Railway Children was formed to try to go out and support them there, to offer immediate protection, perhaps a night shelter, a drop-in centre where we can see what the problem is and stay with them, where we can actually train the community around them to be more sensitive, the vendors on the stations, the cleaners, the porters and others who come into contact with them, and instead of shooing them away, bringing them to us. Then we also work with governments to try to persuade governments to actually adopt policies which actually support and help and develop the situation for street children. And where do you find these kids? All over the world. I don't think there's any country in the world that doesn't have them. We don't always call them street children. In Europe and North America, we probably call them runaways. And last year, I think we have over 1 million runaways in North America every year, somewhere between 100 and 200,000 even in this country. So next slide. So where do we work? Well, we've worked in about 10 countries over the years, but currently we work in 3 major locations. In India, where our focus is very much on the railway platform. As it says there, every 5 minutes a child arrives alone on a platform. You find in India many children on and around the stations, and some are actually railway families there. But we try to concentrate on and pick out those children who've run away from home before they get into danger. We have workers who actually go out on the stations looking for the trains where we expect most of the children to come. Very often those street workers are former street children themselves because they can get the confidence of the children. In Africa, we're working in Kenya and Tanzania. You see the picture there, 250,000, 250,000 children on Kenya. We're actually working specifically as well in Tanzania at the moment, where the government has actually signed up to the United Nations guidelines on street children, something that the Consortium for Street Children, a network of organisations working for street children, has been pushing for a number of years. And we're actually being funded by USAID and the Department for International Development to actually help the Tanzanian government develop policies in 6 of their cities across Tanzania. And then we can't forget the situation in our own country. Somewhere between 100 and 200,000 children run away every year in this country. And our British Transport Police can pick them up on the stations. In 2019, they actually picked up 10,000 children on our UK railway stations. Manchester Piccadilly was the #1 hotspot. And we're currently working with the BT Police. We have counsellors in Manchester and London and Leeds who work with the police. So the children are referred to us, and we see them through an ongoing situation to try to sort their problems out. Next, please. 25 years ago, I was on a business trip. Railways coming back from Australia, called in at India, and on my way to a meeting, got a bit lost and finished up at a large railway station in the city of Mumbai. It was a morning rush hour, and while I was trying to sort out where I was, a little girl came out of the crowd. She couldn't have been more than about 6 or 7 years of age, and she was obviously begging, and I had no loose change, so I waved her away. To my horror, this little girl took a whip out and started lashing herself across the back, obviously to try and get sympathy and get her begging. And I realised she was being exploited, trafficked by some unscrupulous adult. And I never got that experience out of my mind. If I shut my eyes, I can still see that little girl looking at me. And so when I got back to this country, I felt led. I felt God was calling me to do something. I got involved with Amnesty International, their children's rights group, and then their rep on the Consortium for Street Children, a network of charities working for street children worldwide. And that's where I found that there was at that time, no particular charity targeting the children in what I thought was the most vulnerable time of all, those first few hours when a child has run away. I was introduced to 2 Salvation Army officers who used to go around the big London railway stations back in the 1980s, 1990s. These 2 women told me they picked up 3,500 children in 10 years on our London railway stations. I think King's Cross was the worst. And they said a child at that time on one of our stations had on average between 10 and 20 minutes before they'd be targeted by pimps, paedophile, or drug pushers. And that's when as I say, I saw the problem existed in this country, and we could not ignore the problems here as far as the situation, as well as the situation overseas. So next, please. So what do we do? As I said, we have people looking for the children on the stations, transport systems in Africa, the bus stations and the matatu stands. And they bring them, and we try to find a drop-in centre and a night shelter where the child can stay overnight. And the first thing we try to do is to protect that child from any immediate danger. And then, of course, we're trying to get their confidence to find out why they're there. What's the next step? Can we get them back home if they've run away for some reason that can be patched up? Or if it was an abusive situation, can we get them into a residential home, either with one of our partner organisations or alternatively a government home? Or can we get them into education? They're the things that we try to do immediately. And of course, we have a motherly type in the drop-in centre who's there working with the children, befriending them and trying to find out the situation. Next. So as I say, we try to sort out what we do. And one of the things that we've been able to do, we get about a quarter of the children actually back home, because so often we can follow up and find out what the cause was of the child running away, and then counsel the family as well as the child, and go back 3 months later, 6 months later, to see that the situation that we set up is in fact working. Many of the children, of course, were running away from abuse at home, so we can't take them back in that situation. Some are running away because they've been bullied at school, some because just of sheer poverty in their houses and so forth. Next. We've been doing that sort of work, as I say, for 20, 25 years, but the pandemic has hit us in this last year and has altered the situation entirely. In India, for instance, because of the lockdown, there aren't any trains running, and therefore the stations are closed. And where do these children go then? And they've got no food, they've got no access to any work, no food. And so what we've been trying to do for these children is to actually seek them out, to give them advice about keeping safe, to give them face masks, to give them food and so forth, and if there are families, to actually seek help that way. And some of these children are very, very young indeed. The average age for a street child in India is only 8. I've found 4-year-olds on the street. In Africa, it's probably nearer 10 to 12. In this country, probably mainly in the age of 12 to 15 for the runaways. That's the most vulnerable age of all. And so, as I say, in India, we actually last year, I think we can see on the next slide, yeah, we actually reached nearly 3,000 families providing food and emergency supplies, the support network to the street children, probably servicing over 6,000 children. In Africa, equally, nearly 3,000 people are actually, 3,000 children on the streets there. A lot of violence in Africa affecting street children, which we try to alleviate and to try to work with the police and educate the police to protect these children. And as I say, in England, in Britain, we actually have trained nearly 3,000 police, railway police and staff on railway stations to look out for these children and to know what to do and what to say. We have a training scheme called You See, We See. You see a child who's loitering, maybe causing problems. We see a child who needs support. And therefore, we've trained people on what to say, how to approach them, who to refer them to. And we are, as I said previously, working with counsellors alongside the British Transport Police in three major locations at the moment, and hopefully soon a fourth in this particular country. Next, please. So, here we are. The railway industry has been enormously supportive. The railway children is actually almost the charity of the railway children, of the railway industry. Last year, with their help, we actually managed to reach over 15,000 children. We also get support from government aid, and of course, many schools and churches, just like yourselves, are supporting us in this way, for which we are in fact very grateful indeed. You might think that during the pandemic period, it's been hard to keep our fundraising going, but in fact, we have actually increased this particular year. The only problem is that the work we have to do because of the pandemic has increased as well. So I think the time has come, but if I just say with the last slide here, a big thank you.
The two topics I'm covering this afternoon, as you see here, are the causes and our response. And indeed, we have looked a little bit at the causes as we've been going through the whole morning, and certainly listening to the brilliant inputs from the three charities that spoke this afternoon were inspirational and also informative, and looked at the causes to some degree. I'd like to tell you a story which kind of encompasses really the main causes as we see it today, though there are many. And it's a story of one of our key workers from Renata, who has a shelter in Athens in Greece. And the story is of a young girl who was persuaded to get to Europe from Haiti by, in fact, a Haiti trafficker, though she did not know it. She was offered a wonderful job in Turkey, where she would be able to feed her mother and her child. She was a single parent, very young. So she left on the plane, and on the plane she met two people, and they landed in Istanbul, and there was meant to be a man waiting for this girl to take her to her place of work. In fact, she was meant to be in another town in Turkey. Sorry, I said Istanbul. Yeah, Istanbul, that's right. And so this couple that she met on the plane and who was very worried about her, still thought if she could phone the guy, which she did, and she did get instructions that she was in the wrong town to get on another plane and get to the right place, which she did by the next day. And she stayed with this couple overnight. And to cut to the quick, as when she was met, and indeed she was met by a man with a telephone in his hand who told her, and he had in his mobile phone a picture of this young woman's mother. And he said to her, if you don't do what I tell you to do, your mother will be killed by and he didn't name it, by the person who sent you in Haiti. She was horrifically abused into sexual exploitation. And this man had a wife who was pregnant, and it was the wife who oversaw the trafficking of this girl in her house, indeed. And the girl herself became very sick and thin and was not functioning, and the clients were saying she was no good. So this wife took her to a beauty salon to be pampered in order to build up her reserve for the clients. The following week, she did the same. Now, by this time, the girl had known that her passport and her mobile phone was in a box, which this wife kept closely to her side, constantly showing her pictures of the mother that they would kill if she didn't do what they told her to do. And the week later, when they went to this salon, actually to have their hair cut, the woman, the wife, was sitting in the chair. She left the seat by the side of the girl to have her hair cut. And thank God she left the little box with the phone and all the equipment, the passport and other stuff belonging to the girl. So the girl had the sense to quickly grab the box and run. And she phoned this couple that were not with her anymore, and they told her about a boat, and it was just a dinghy that was leaving the port where she was for Lesbos, which was constant from Turkey. The boats are going all the time with migrants, and they have to pay £1,000. And the girl was able to get her mother to transfer this money with a quick whip round from the family in order to get the girl to Lesbos. When the girl did arrive in Lesbos, actually the Greek authorities had already surrounded the boat before it arrived in Lesbos, and this girl was taken eventually to our shelter in Greece, Damaris House, and there she was discovered that she was already pregnant. So this was a young girl who had been raped. She had already had a child and become a single parent, as her mother was, so a dysfunctional family, if you like. But now this girl is being very well supported in Damaris House. The baby has been born, and this Damaris House is run by a Christian evangelical group, and they have a program of reintegration and also of new life based on the gospel and based on prayer and meditation. And this girl has taken to this and been drawn into a conversion experience, which has given her joy and new life for the future. Now we might say, excuse me, well, what are the causes for her trafficking? Poverty, dysfunctionality. From the trafficker's angle, easy money, greed on the part of the perpetrators wanting sex cheap in Turkey. All the causes that we've talked about so far today are part of her story. And perhaps, we talked about prevention recently in the inputs we've just received. Perhaps the biggest vulnerability for this girl was lack of understanding of her own possible plight and the ease in which she trusted because of the need to hope for a future. So we could say that our main response is linked with prevention, and we'll talk about that in a while. But the global economic reality we spoke about this morning is at the heart of the cause. And at the heart of that is greed. And at the heart of that, if you like, is instant desire for a quick fix, which goes to demand. And if we take the capacity of the human being to be fully alive, we really need to look at the word compassion, because at the heart of humanity, which makes the human being different to any other part of creation, is the ability to love empathetically with deep compassion. If you take, say, a tree, some people say a tree has feelings, and I do myself feel there is energy in tree and nature that we can connect with. We're all connected in huge numbers of ways. If you take this circle of compassion of a tree, it's itself. It survives and it grows and it's nurtured by others. If you take a duck, the circle of compassion grows a little bit bigger because the duck cares for its ducklings and it will really protect those ducklings. And if you take an elephant, the circle of compassion gets bigger. The elephant will care for its baby elephants, and certainly the norm is that the elephant will care for its family, its extended family. And there is some understanding that the elephant actually cares for any elephant it has met. But that's the circle of compassion. Whereas a human being, the circle of compassion is beyond our capacity to really touch. That it's our family, it's our friends, it's our extended friends of friends. It's bigger and bigger and bigger. We have compassion for nature. We have compassion for the animal world. We have compassion for the suffering of those we've never met. We have the capacity from the gift of God in our basic DNA almost to love with the capacity that God gives us to love, which is God's love. And it's incredible. But if we as a human being decide not to love, decide to reject and to close our circle in any way, then we do not have the ability, we're not even the ability, we close our circle of compassion and we become less human in the capacity we've been given. So if you take our world today and you take trafficking and you see what is happening to 40 million people and multiply that again by war and hatred and greed and a million other things that destroy the capacity of the human being, or they lower their own capacity of compassion, then our world is being destroyed. Our world is being broken down in the capacity it's been given by God to be beautiful and fully alive and free. So if you like, each one of us thinking here today are called to really reflect on our call from God to love. And how wide do we want the circle of God's love to be empowered as God would desire it within us? And we know none of us are perfect, but it's the desire, God's desiring in us, that we want to touch in our prayer and in our lives for each other. So if you like, it's a domino concertina impact, this whole trading in human beings. It's breaking down the capacity of the world, and it's breaking down the actual ability of the creation of our world to flourish fully. Thanks, Matt. So we're looking a little bit about our economic reality, which we picked up on this morning. But this image enables us to, if you like, look at what is the consequence of greed and the manner in which the capitalist, neoliberalist approach to our economy is giving another imbalance in the world, and the greedier and the rich are getting richer and richer and richer, while the majority of the world is sinking and not able to survive in the manner it should if everything was shared. Thanks. So we have a reflection. Look at these statistics. 8,000, and I didn't put the word in here, but it's billion profit of trafficking in the world. Imagine. That is the profit of trafficking. And for one organ transplant in Europe that's trafficked and sold, the traffickers receiving $200,000 in many parts of the world. Unregulated technology. We have talked about these terrible situations during COVID of online exploitation. We've heard from Stop the Traffic of how they're trying to trace this and create some kind of platform to enable us to work together to stop. Silos and individualism. Again, you know, I pick up on what we said this morning about collaboration, working together, forming networks, not being a silo in our way of planning to combat human trafficking. And finally, developing this new consciousness. I think this is something terribly important. I would recommend you to read a book called The You Theory by Otto Charmer. The name is spelled S-C-H-A-R-M-E-R, and I will write it in the chat box. The You Theory is a very simple approach to everybody working towards a new consciousness of co-creating circles. And I really would recommend the Methodist Women in Britain to look at this, because it gives you a massive amount of courage and energy to focus on what you choose through discernment to come up with. And if you like, the U, as you see the shape of a U in the alphabet, and the first side is self-reflection. So it's like facing yourself and your inner soul and touching your inner desires and your inner drawings from God to love at a deeper and richer level, and to face yourself in the letting go of what maybe prevents from this. And as you turn the U, the loving leads you to connect. And all of that listening to self empowers you to listen to others. And this is really, really important in the work against human trafficking. And it's not just listening in a manner that you're listening to what you hope to hear, or with already set answers, or with a kind of listening to the person with the character that that person is, and not having that trust and openness and letting go to truly listen to the wisdom that might come forth, and usually does. So we're coming up the circle, opening and opening, just like, as we said, not a duckling, not an elephant, but as a created human being, to hear what is being said in a manner that you let go of everything you've ever known, so that you can hear new ideas and creations emerging for your way forward. And believe me, this new consciousness is like electricity, and you begin to sense things before you hardly hear them, because they're ringing around your consciousness from all sorts of capacities of listening that are developing in you. And I would really invite you to do this. It's the deepest form of praying. And it's an invitation to pray with total abandonment to God speaking in you at the spirit level, at the deepest level of your desiring, but also therefore with the capacity to do it with others who are the God voice for you. And I think this is one of the first solutions, because we can only work together when we listen together. And I would add to this just a few points about listening when you're walking the streets, or you're at work, or you're waiting for a bus, or you're in a conversation with somebody. To spot, to be aware that you might see somebody looking malnourished. So I'm going to define what you look out for a trafficked person. And these are what trigger from being trafficked, if you like, the causes. And this is what happens. So the person's often malnourished, as we heard in some of the inputs there. We also have signs of physical injuries often, and bruises and abuse. Often the trafficked person will avoid all sorts of eye contact, all social interaction, and certainly with authority figures and law enforcement, because they're very afraid of being caught in crime when they're not guilty of anything. They seem to adhere to a scripted or rehearsed response if you speak to them and they speak back. And sometimes it's the same name that might be said by 6 people from the same nation, because they've been taught to say that. Also, they're lacking often, as we've discovered, official identity documents. And this is important in the listening, that you're listening to what you see, what you don't expect to see, but then you do, because you're really, really listening. Thank you. So we're now going to perhaps listen with our eyes and our ears to pictures and a song written by an Australian sister related to human trafficking. So I hand over to our readers now. Thank you.
Can you see me? Can you see me in the things that you purchase, in a place where the prices there suit you so well? Can you imagine the place where I'm working? No food and no breaks, in a sweatshop that's hell. Can you see me? Can you see me in the shadows and darkness, where my body is sold for minutes and hours? Can you imagine the suffering in sex trade, where dreams are stolen, and so is my power? Can you see me?
Look, look, don't turn away. I'm calling to you and just want to say, see all you can and tell others about me and help to bring freedom and justice for all. Can you see me? Can you see me in the fields of the farmers who bribe us there to be there and won't set us free? Back-breaking work, no matter the weather, picking and packing your fruit and veggies. Can you see me?
Can you see me in the shed by the highway where people are harvested for body parts? My brother lost eyes and I gave a kidney. The dead are just dumped like trash from a cart. Can you see me? I'm all around you, hidden from vision, wondering if I will ever be free, longing for life and for chains to be broken, longing for sunlight, for justice and peace. Can you see me? Can you see me? Can you see me? Can you see me? Can you see me?
So in the final little section of our inputs today, we're going to look at, what can I do? So the first thing I would encourage everybody to do, which I still do, is to educate ourselves. It's always new, it's always changing, but there is a basic understanding of all of this, which most of you probably already have, but you can deepen and feel confident about. So, you know, find out your helpline. I've put one here, which is the national one, but there is also a Salvation Army UK helpline, and I'm sure Stop the Traffic, they will have one. So you need to know and have them in your pocket or your handbag or somewhere where you can whip it out and use it, or even put it into your phone. And another way of educating yourself is by volunteering, because there's nothing like raw experience. And in UK, I know the Medaille Trust has 10 shelters all over the country, and they're always glad for volunteers. I absolutely know that. And there are also needs for volunteers. There's more shelters actually in London run by Bakita House, which is the Catholic Church, and there's two or three others run by the Catholic Church in London. But I'm sure other faith traditions, yourselves even, might have shelters that you're running. And you can volunteer in order to be aware of the needs, if you like, of the traffic victims. Often they ask you to take a traffic person to the courts or to the hospital to get some treatment. They need helpers to accompany the trafficked to their various places that they need to get to, because in Britain, unlike in, say, Albania or most other poorer countries, in Britain, the social services and the statutory services are so incredible that generally the shelters use those services to do the backup work for the reintegration process of a trafficked young person. So, you know, you can imagine, you know, the waiting time and all this. So the volunteers are really, really important. You learn so much. You can also, once you have your education feeling stronger inside, you feel you're ready, you can write to your local politicians. Some of you talked about this morning. You can raise awareness with them and ask them to bring it to Parliament to change the Modern Slavery Act. This is the thing we're all working towards at the moment, and also to bring in the Nordic model law against prostitution and victimization of those working in prostitution, rather than criminalizing the perpetrators, which is such a hierarchical approach when this is not addressed. And also, I think this has been brought up by the charities this afternoon. Fundraising is really important. Most of us struggle very much without funding, that we need to do the work. And during COVID, I mean, it's lovely that the railway children were saying that they had more during COVID. I must say, we've found it harder during COVID. And I think that Hope for Justice were looking as if they were struggling too. But this is the norm, and we trust in God, knowing that if it's of God, like Gamaliel in the Acts of the Apostles, it will flourish, and we will work hard on our part to ensure that. But if you can help organisations with fundraising and maybe adopt one, that's really good for those in the coalface who are working away. Thanks, Matt. So that's all part of education. Now this is self-education. Now we're looking at you even moving deeper into educating. And we know that children, minors, are the most vulnerable, and there's not many going into schools to do this education against trafficking. We have a project in Albania where we targeted all the schools, but I believe in England it's not so much done, and especially the whole area of education against cyber trafficking is very important. There is a marvelous organization in England called INEQE, I-N-E-Q-E, that focuses solely on this, and they have apps and toolkits. And I would encourage you to maybe link in with them, or see if you can get your own toolkit and then go into a school or a local church, a local youth provision, whatever, and raise awareness about human trafficking. Thank you. And besides raising awareness in the schools, I would like to suggest that you develop a social media platform yourselves. If you have, you've probably already got one, but you could dedicate a part of it to human trafficking and anti-human trafficking. So this is a different kind of awareness raising and education, and could be seen as prevention. As with Justice, Hope for Justice, they used it as a synonymous tool, this prevention and awareness raising. And I'm going to talk about prevention in a while, the way we tackle prevention. But of course it is prevention. If you educate, you stop the trafficking, hopefully. So, you know, educate the parents of the children in the school about how traffickers target youth, and educate the youth in as many online platforms as you can, because they're on those platforms all the time. And certainly link with all the faith communities that you can have, that you can link with in order to form your networks to raise awareness. Thank you, Matt. Now, prevention. Prevention, as we see it and work with it through our ASK centres, so the advice and service centres in Tirana, is empowerment. And if you have unsafe migration, if you have dysfunction families because of poverty and because of patriarchy, then you've got vulnerable young people because they want to escape from all those evils, those suffering as children. So how do you prevent that? So certainly through awareness raising in the schools, but also by picking up on the most vulnerable, those who drop out, and to do a whole programs of economic empowerment through human empowerment first, so they have the strength, inner strength to be who they want to be, and then employment, empowerment towards employment, with giving them the tools and skills for being employable, which is hugely important, responsibility and confidence and communication skills and all these things we teach, but also vocational skills with the chosen profession that they'd like to get into. So many of our young women choose some of the normal trades, but some have in fact taken up electrician work and plumbing, just like many of our young men are taking up vocational training in some of the girls' fields. So prevention is a big task and a costly task, but it's very, very important to prevent unsafe migration. And prevention is, of course, part of awareness raising as well. Thank you. And finally, we look at advocacy and prevention. Now, you have spoken about this yourselves this morning, and advocacy is included in the prevention work. So I think it's bringing on board with you all those people who might dip into the trafficked world. So we have doctors groups now in Britain. We have a young doctor in Birmingham who has set up an anti-trafficking group for preventing human trafficking. So they, and also for spotting and rescuing, because they would say 75% of trafficked people will be presented to a doctor or a nurse during the time that they're being trafficked. Also, to target the journalists and get them on board with you, so that they are writing the stories with you about human trafficking and highlighting the issues through film and through spoken word. And the lawyers, of course, I mean, Hope for Justice is doing a remarkable job. And we're in AMSA, the new English NGO that we're part of, Anti-Modern Slavery Alliance, is going to set up a legal aid hub in Britain. I mentioned that this morning, but it's a very big focus for us. And lawyers are needing to be supported in their education towards protecting and prosecution and defense of trafficked people. And businesses, well, we are bringing the corporates to the front line in AMSA, so you can yourselves You might be involved in some of the businesses around you. How are they addressing their supply chains? You know, lobby them. It's not just the MPs you need to lobby, it's your local business people. Where are they getting their cloth from, or their clothes from, or their coffee from, or their fruit and veg from? And keep asking the questions. Do you know, one of the most amazing ways of working in advocacy is to just ask a question and raise the issue in conversations, in people you know, people you can connect with. So I do encourage you to begin in these basic ways and keep developing and evolving your processes together. Thank you. And so it is together we are strong, and it's been our message today, I think. I want to thank you all because I feel very bonded with you by being together with you. I feel sometimes you experience being quite alone in this work. I'm on my own here in Albania as a sister, of course, constantly connected with my community in Britain. But this is a lovely experience being with you Methodists. So a big hearty thank you from me, from my heart. And please pray for me. That's the most you can give to me. And I will never forget to pray for you with gratitude. Thank you.